I want to just set the scene of what's happening in that first reading from the prophet Isaiah, because there's some history we need to know that helps us to understand this event. Namely, that the people of Israel are saved by an anointed one, by a Messiah, who is not Jewish, but who is pagan. So around the year 597 BC, the people of Israel were marched out of their land in Jerusalem and led into captivity in Babylon. And there they were held. Their worship of God was interrupted. Many of their lives were destroyed. Their promised land was handed over to their enemy. It was a terrible time, one of the darkest times in the history of the people of Israel. But after 70 years, King Cyrus conquered the Babylonians and was called by God to release his people and to send them back to Israel. And so it's this foreign king, not a believer in the God of Israel, who not only sends them back to the land that was theirs, but instructs them to rebuild their temple and then gives them the money to pay for it. I mean, to say this is unusual is a huge understatement. He had no need to do that. He could have kept his wealth and lorded over his newly conquered kingdom, but something happened to King Cyrus. God himself moved his heart to make this offer of charity, to receive what God had given and to offer it in charity. And this is what we hear described in the prophet Isaiah today in that first reading. And there is a very, very, very important lesson for us here. God blesses and blesses and blesses in abundance. God pours mercy on us, even when we don't deserve it. God enriches our lives with friends and opportunities for joy. God announces new hope through his Son. God gives and gives and gives. And to us who have been chosen as the recipients of all these things, God says to us, now you give. Now you offer in charity what you did not deserve to receive. Give it freely to those who need it. Give to the world what belongs to the world, and give to God what belongs to God. But we have to remember that in the end, it all comes from him. A rightly ordered world and a rightly ordered person recognizes that everything that exists is a gift from him. And this is the starting point for us. It's the starting point for any civilization and any fruitful culture. And so when leaders of nations try and seize what is not theirs, violence and war break out. When individuals pursue their own power for their own benefit, then corruption flourishes. When spouses seek their own desires and interests rather than those of their beloved, animosity begins to wreak havoc. When our young people, our children play games, sports, and we pile mockery upon mockery on the heads of those who are competing against them, we are hurting deeply the unity that God is trying to sustain. There is a word for all of this, and it is scandal. It is a scandal to take what God has given and use it to hurt others or to create division. Because God gives every gift for good, not so that we can do harm, not so that we can tear others down, not so that we can build our own kingdom. This is why a rightly ordered world recognizes that everything has been given by God. And look, King Cyrus didn't know the Lord when he conquered Babylon, but he knew him afterward. He knew him enough to restore to them to the people of Israel what God had previously given. Maybe we would know the Lord better if we used what we were given in the way that those gifts were meant to be used. You know, I know a lot of times people will say, I feel like God is distant, or I feel like God has abandoned me, or I feel like God doesn't care. And I would say, well, then let's pay attention to how we're using what we've been given. Because if God feels distant, then maybe you're not using those gifts for the purpose that God gave them to you. In so many ways, this is why we need to return here, just like the people of Israel needed to return to Jerusalem. We need to return here to remember who we are and who has blessed us in so many ways. And if we need to do that every day because the world around us is distracting us or pulling us in a bunch of different directions, then let's come back here every day so that we won't forget. Because we can live our lives as though we are in exile. We can live in what feels like a foreign land where the behavior around us doesn't seem to fit with who we are and why we're here. And so if we feel like we have to use our power to manipulate others, it's a sign that we're living in exile, acting as though we're in a foreign land. If we feel the need to cripple other people by slander and gossip, then we are not living in the land that God wants us to live in. If we're screaming obscenities at our children and teaching them to do the same, we are not in the land of the Lord. If we're living in adultery and not respecting the dignity of marriage, then we need to allow the Lord into that space so that he can consecrate it and make it holy. Friends, what we see happening in the world today doesn't just happen. It emerges from the hearts of people who are not ordered properly towards Christ, who have lost sight of who has given the blessing and what the blessing is for. And so let's return to the Lord from our exile, asking that we can acknowledge what he has done and to live well our identity as the beloved daughters and sons of God. This is our land of promise. Let's not waste it away by living as though we were in exile.